All right. How's it going, John?
Good. How are you doing today, Julie?
Good, good. So, you ready to discuss the great media debates?
The great media debate it is.
Totally. So, I'm gonna do a little screen share with you of something I made on emails. So this will be our presentation for the day. Great media debate. And I know she really was basing this discussion on Marshall McLuhan's quote, "The medium is the message." And I
Right.
know, did you look at some of the things that he had said, Marshall McLuhan?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you've
Yeah,
kind of known a little bit about him before, if you read and stuff like that, you run up into people. But um, the medium is the message. Just focusing on this one specifically, just because like it is kind of like the big one that I think is the value for us is, um, you know, it definitely has an impact, and I think that that's something that needs to needs to be addressed. I think that's what this whole debate is about. Like, how much is that impact? You know what I mean? And so, uh, seeing the things that Marshall McLuhan did, and thinking that he is doing these in a time when the mediums were very few and far between,
yeah,
compared to like today. I think about that a lot too, and the fact that he was able to think, the medium is the message a little bit is kind of like, yeah, it is in a lot of ways for a lot of things, and I don't know. And I think probably the experience with television for him is the big thing that
yeah.
shaped his view. So
Yeah, I mean, he really didn't have a lot of different mediums compared to what we have today, but there was still a massive change, a massive shift that was already happening. But to think in 1964, he's already saying it's not about the content that's being delivered as much as the medium that's delivering the content, and that's actually really what should be addressed. So
right,
this next one also from him, which of course our faces are on top of, is your face. Like in my screen, at least, our faces are on top of it. The medium shapes and controls the scale and form of human association and action. So it's interesting to look at the fact that that whatever that medium is, whether it's pen and paper or watching something on YouTube, it's interesting to see how we relate to that as human beings.
absolutely, and how much we can associate other things to it based on that relation.
Yeah. I saw in one of the sources I was looking at, it was tying to Socrates, and it kind of reminded me, I don't know if you knew this and I had forgotten this, but Socrates at one point had told people that he didn't want them to write. He believed that writing actually diminished the memory. So
Yeah,
you shouldn't write, you should just memorize things. That actually diminishes that. And it's interesting because that would be the technological development of the day, people actually being literate human beings versus just being able to remember something. And he's saying that takes away from memory, when in fact, in some ways he's right. Yeah, we don't feel the need to memorize something,
but
but
the collective memory becomes much greater and much more accurate.
yes, can you imagine that they said Plato wrote down everything Socrates said, and so Socrates, you're like, haha, joke's kind of on you because
Yeah,
don't
right.
write
I
down
know,
your
right.
stuff so that we can actually learn it years later. We wouldn't be able
Yeah.
to memorize his words without somebody else having written it down. So it's interesting, and I kind of feel like that's a little bit of what we're going to get into on this debate too.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's very true.
Yeah. So the debate really goes back to these two guys, Clark versus Kozma, and the method versus the media and the method theory. And again, I just think it's so bizarre that they're debating this so long ago. I mean, we
Mm.
thought 1964 was a long time ago. 1991 or 1994 feel like ancient at this point, that they're discussing technology. And I trying to think about what technology even looked like at that point is an interesting.
Ooh.
So
There were definitely some computers.
yeah, definitely. Richard Clark said the media are mere vehicles that deliver instruction but do not influence student achievement any more than the truck that delivers our groceries causes change in our nutrition.
Yeah, it's that quote. It's the one like I get stuck on this one as well. I see it both ways, I guess. And I wrote down a little thing that I just kind of want to read. It says really quickly. Oh, but I can't see it because I'm on this one.
Oh, it's not gonna let me move you somewhere else.
No, you're.
I'm trying to move us so that we can, we're not in the quotes. It doesn't want to move us anywhere else. Okay, well there we
No
go.
worries. I think on this one is the one thing that I wrote down is that well, I kind of agree with the analogy in a way that the truck is merely trying to get you there, and I do see a lot of tools and a lot of technology that are trucks. For instance, for me, like word processing is a truck.
Yeah.
No matter what technology you're using at this point, it's a truck. You could use Pages, you could use Word, and when the tools become so many that they become trucks, you know what I mean? Like
totally.
once you have enough tools that saturate that area, and basically then all of it becomes a truck. It's a what he's saying, a vehicle for the delivery of instruction. But I don't think that we're there yet where all technology is like that. I do think that there is technology that is unique and that is new and that can be used to drill into things. So I don't know. I find that this quote very, very interesting. And I thought about it in a lot of different ways, because the truck doesn't change your nutrition or your learning, in his analogy, until it does something special. Well, I think that the introduction of iPads in education and adaptive learning modules and all kinds of things that we could look at are still so new that we're not sure if they're the truck or if they're the medium yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I even want to get to taking his analogy quite literally, that the truck that delivers our groceries causes a change in our nutrition. And I even disagree with that too.
Yeah,
like if this is a truck that does not have a refrigerator in it, so if we go back to old school technology where it's a vehicle that does not have refrigeration in it, your nutritional value is going to change and what you're able to actually ingest. And so throughout time, as that truck becomes more sophisticated, as that media, if you will, becomes more sophisticated at the truck, we're getting a different nutrition in us. And so the fact that we have a truck that can get that food to us so quickly today is changing our nutritional value, and it's causing people to live longer. I mean, and then it's causing us to have issues with,
basically he's just wrong on all sorts of levels then.
I mean, literally taking it to a very literal fact of he's wrong,
Yeah, right.
I do think that the truck actually does matter. Now, necessarily which truck, whether it's a BMW truck or I'm trying to think of the other brands, but BMW actually makes 18-wheelers, but I don't think that necessarily matters as much as when you look at over time that we have seen a change happening in that. So anyway.
Yeah, of course. That's interesting. Just an interesting quote, analogy.
Isn't it? Yeah. He also said, and I love the year he says this, in 1983, media do not influence learning under any circumstance, and he will stand by this for 30 years, which is interesting. If he's starting in 1983, that he, is still standing by it 30 years later is a little shocking.
Yeah.
He has some interesting points, but he discounts a lot of things, obviously.
Yeah. I think whenever you take a hardline stance like this, you don't take any room for gray area.
Yeah.
And I guess that was academia for a long time. You took a hardline stance and you proved it and you stuck with it. I don't know. I think it's much easier to kind of take a holistic approach to things nowadays.
Totally. Dangerous spot. He also says cost and distribution are the only factors impacting which media should be or is used. There's no benefit from the media, and he says we should just give up studying the relationship between media and learning, which I think is interesting that he says we should.
Yeah, I have to disagree with him on the first one though. Being involved in like budgeting for cost of media and things like that, like which media you can use, and looking at like in my school right now, I'm looking at subscriptions for lynda.com, which is like an educational website. I'm looking for all kinds of different things, and it's like looking through the costs of them, you realize that like it is a pretty important factor, and distributions is an also important factor, especially when you live in a country like China and I can't get everything readily available.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Well, and I think of it even like using things like emails. Like I've been using it a lot. Obviously, I'm using it for this presentation, but to actually use it to collaborate with somebody like you would a Google presentation, you have to buy a subscription. That's a cost thing. So
and that technology is great.
If we have to collaborate in the project, we're going to use Google presentations because it works for us and we've already
That's
paid for
exactly
it
right.
versus paying for yet another thing. So he has a point for sure.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Kozma says, and again, he's talking 1994, so he's a little bit more recent. But he says, Clark's separation of medium from method creates an unnecessary and undesirable schism between medium and method. Both should have more integral relationship. So, one saying that the method is the only thing that matters, and he doesn't say that the method doesn't matter. He says that they both matter, basically.
Yeah, basically working in conjunction. I don't have to tend to agree with him.
Yeah. Both medium and method are crucial. Using the correct medium could have an impact on the student's cognitive skills, and I definitely agree with that. That there are certain mediums that are just going to be better than others for students to be learning. Some that are going to be more challenging.
Yeah, I think it definitely ranges age groups and things like that as well. Like, I always wondered in arguments like this, like, what age group are you talking about? Because the medium actually means a lot more the younger you introduce it.
Yeah.
In our age, as students, in high school and things like that, what you see today, like the medium may not be as vital as it once was. I think it's still important in a lot of ways, but it may not be but in an elementary setting, like in a second and third grade setting, something like that, as soon as you introduce something that's new, like an iPad, like you see how powerful the tool can be for the kids, how much they're on it, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, which position do you support?
I mean, a combination of both, I think, but definitely Cosma's saying the right thing, that they are integral to each other, that they're both related. I think Clark's too hardline. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree that he's definitely so emphasizing the methodology of the teaching and not necessarily the media, that becomes dangerous. When I think of, I, instead of just talking about, an example in class a few weeks ago, we were talking about, are people naturally good or evil? And we had an interesting debate. We were talking about the Enlightenment and history, and that was one of the things where they start changing from a belief that people are naturally evil to a belief that maybe people are naturally good. And so that's still a question today, And so in between classes, I just looked it up. I was like, I bet somebody's done a study on this. And so in the next class I had, so I had an off period. The next class I showed a video. Yale University actually did a study on infants, trying to figure out, are humans naturally good or naturally evil?
Yeah, there had to be a study out there somewhere.
Yeah, there had to be a study that was filmed, and it was fascinating. The kids were like, whoa. And that necessarily didn't answer the question completely, but it gave, instead of us just debating the issue and wondering, it gave, somebody's actually studied this, and let's take it to
there's some
level. And I'm
data.
not saying that what Yale said was right, because Yale was honestly inconclusive. They said, I think it was like 65 to 70% of the babies chose the good, chose good versus evil.
How young were the babies?
What?
How young were the
They
babies?
were not speaking age yet.
Oh, okay, but it still had some environmental factors.
Yeah, so they still had some environmental factors, but yes, it was interesting to see that. But you see learning come alive with that, so they're really like, oh, I that's interesting. And I couldn't imagine teaching without video streaming, without even like going back to the 90s, when we were kids in school. I couldn't imagine even going back and not having a video,
Yeah. I'll tell you the one thing that's helping me the amazing amounts, and this is how it shows you how far kids have come, is like we're slowly moving all of my program technology stuff from the design courses, letting the kids choose their own projects, and they're picking all open source applications to do things.
Really?
It's amazing. They're using like Blender for animation, and they're doing coding through virtual environments and things like that. Everything is just open source. Like, it's ridiculous. It's all free, because it's like, here we have to push that because I can't get a lot of things and access to things. So we're having to create our own platforms, and like,
wow.
We have a little culture going here of just like computer stuff, which is pretty cool. But that's the kind of thing that like it shows you, right? Like, they're getting so much out of it because they're learning it on their own. So I don't even know most of the stuff we're learning. Like, we're just diving in together sometimes. So it's been, it's really interesting, but it fits right into this discussion because it's like the kids, some of them can't open an email but they can pull an open source program, throw it in their file directory, pull out the code, and start manipulating it. I'm like, what? Who didn't teach you to type, but you can do this?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, I think to say I think it's just dangerous for Clark to say that the medium doesn't matter. One of the videos I watched was a video, the 2007 video, was it called? The machine is using.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it
Well.
was interesting because it was playing around with text. The whole thing was just playing around with text, and you just saw the importance of technology. I mean, pen and paper, you write something down, it's so linear, it's hard to adjust. You want to make room for something, you had to think about that ahead of time and leave room for something. And if you make an error, there's a left a mark or you have whiteout,
It's really amazing. Yeah.
Movable, changeable, and linkable things really are when you're actually typing it. What a different story that is. I mean, and so to say that the medium, even if we go from like pen and paper to typewriter, to a computer system that does this, and you have to acknowledge that the medium.
And now we're seeing kids like moving into exactly what you're talking about, like where they're like they control text in ways that like our generation, when we were their age, didn't even know. We didn't even know it happened.
Yeah. And I'm amazed at how technology works. I don't know if you've used this on your Mac, but I had to do an interview last semester and I just Googled it. I was like, can my Mac turn words into, like work like Siri? And it can. So
of course it can. Yeah.
And it's better than Siri. I did the entire interview that way. And what was amazing about it was how smart it was. Like the words would start appearing on the screen and I would say like a few sentences at a time. And as I was saying it would start typing something. And as I was finishing the sentence, it would realize, oh, she didn't mean that. And so it would go back and then it would make it right. It would actually correct itself based on how I finished the sentence. Oh, that's not the there she was talking about. Oh, that word might have sounded like that initially to me, but when I see the end, that's not. It was right a tremendous amount of the time. There were very few errors, which is mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
The computer can learn like that and can be function like that. And to say that the medium isn't important is just.
It's not because you do those kind of things and you're just like, wow. Yeah. I just learned so much from that experience.
It's fascinating. And then this Tiki Talk was fascinating. The little.
Yeah, and how much it was just bunched towards the end. Like how new most of the technology is that we're like dealing with, and like it's only growing at a faster rate. Like it's hard to believe sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at like the first distance education was at the University of Chicago in 1892. Seriously, what was the other one? There's another one there. It's funny that learning management systems. I thought they would be newer than they are, and they're not. 2005, flipped classrooms 2007. Clickers, I don't think anyone I knew ever used them in the 90s, but it was in the 90s. It was in 90s.
I remember using them once, I think. Really? Just once.
That bold teacher.
Yeah, right? And I was like, this is really hard. I'm not doing this again.
That's funny. That's funny. So, well, I guess we've kind of come up to where it's more leaning toward Cosmos theory with taking a few things from Clark. Really, I think the only thing I'm taking from Clark is the fact that cost determines a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Even the fact that we're changing learning management systems with K-State from something that's a little more expensive to Canvas, which is cheaper, cost determines.
So, nice. Yeah, nice. I don't know. You're thinking about using that's for a different assignment though, huh? But LMSs. I'll discuss LMSs as well at some point.
Yeah. Well, I think we're good.
Okay. Sounds great.
Let me
log us out.
Stop screen share. As I try to find stop screen share, I'm on full screen, so that's what's making this harder. There we go. So yeah, well, I guess we'll chat again for the next discussion.
Cool. Yeah. And I'm off the next 2 weeks for Chinese New Year.